Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, April 2nd. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. First, we should note that today is World Autism Awareness Day, aimed at raising awareness around the world regarding autism spectrum disorders globally. Here in the U.S., the numbers these days are around 1 in 40 individuals have autism or are on the spectrum. So just want to note, this is the beginning of Autism Awareness Month, Autism Awareness Day, and we wanted to ourselves here on the podcast raise awareness to that.
And Moshe, let's get to some headlines here. Immigration officials admit they made an administrative error in deporting someone they shouldn't have to El Salvador. The fallout from that.
What the White House is calling a clerical error, what others are calling illegal and unconstitutional. Jill will break it down.
Today's the day. President Trump calling today Liberation Day for tariffs, what that means and what to expect. The president also expected to hear final plans for TikTok today. Saturday is the deadline to ban the app in the United States if its Chinese parent company ByteDance doesn't sell it. The results from special elections in Florida and Wisconsin. Attorney General Pam Bondi directs prosecutors to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione.
Yeah, this got a lot of reaction, Jill. He faces both a state case and federal case, but it's the feds here who say that he should face the death penalty for killing that insurance executive.
Should House members who just had babies be allowed to vote remotely? That issue causing a divide amongst Republicans. And Moshe, the much-anticipated JFK hearings, Oliver Stone among several experts calling on lawmakers to reopen the Kennedy assassination investigation.
Yeah, we'll have details on what the new documents tell us about what the CIA knew going into the assassination.
Fact-checking some April Fool's Day pranks, admittedly, Moshe. I got fooled. After warning everyone not to get fooled, I was the victim myself.
Yes, Jill, but that's why we're here for you.
Moshe, you're like, it's April Fool's, Jill.
Jill's like on our morning editorial meeting being like, guys, can you believe this? I'm like, no. In fact, I can't believe that because that is false.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, we do some music history on this day, and we go way back to Beethoven's premiere on this day, a couple hundred years ago.
Let's start with some new revelations related to those controversial deportation flights to El Salvador's mega prisons a couple of weeks ago. The administration used 3 flights to quickly deport more than 200 men that it accused of being members of the gang MS-13, using a 200-year-old law that allows them to avoid going through a judge. Well, now the Trump Justice Department is acknowledging that immigration officials made a, quote, administrative error in accidentally deporting a Salvadoran migrant on one of those flights that they were not supposed to. Kilmar Abrigo Garcia was living and working full-time in Maryland. He reportedly crossed into the United States illegally at the age of 16 in 2011 after fleeing gang threats in El Salvador. In 2019, he was detained outside of a Home Depot with 3 other men, one of whom accused Garcia of being a member of the gang MS-13 without evidence. An immigration judge deferred to the government on those claims, despite Garcia disputing that he was in a gang. But at the same time, the judge granted him protected legal status to stay in the United States because of the gang threats that he would face back in El Salvador. Under what is called the withholding of removal statute, he would still be subject to an eventual deportation order, but he was given temporary protected status and was allowed to live and work in the United States. Over the last 6 years, he worked full-time as a union sheet metal apprentice. Since then, Garcia hasn't faced any other legal issues, according to his lawyers, who also, again, insists that he is not part of the MS-13 gang. He's also now married to a U.S. citizen. He has 2 stepchildren and a son born in the United States. Fast forward to earlier this month, on March 12th, Garcia was stopped by immigration agents who inaccurately informed him that his status had changed. He was among the more than 200 alleged gang members who were deported by the Trump administration under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. One of the problems, that order from a judge that he couldn't be deported back to El Salvador because of the threats he faces there. And yet he is now in that mega prison in El Salvador.
So this story really bubbled up late Monday night. It was initially reported by The Atlantic magazine, not a favorite from over there at the White House, dominated the headlines yesterday, including the White House press briefing. Now, ICE officers acknowledge that they were aware of internal forms forbidding them from sending him to El Salvador and called his removal again an oversight. So administrative error, clerical error, oversight. Nonetheless, a judge had said this guy cannot be deported to El Salvador, and yet he was sent to El Salvador. The White House acknowledging their terminology, again, is clerical error, but argued that he was an MS-13 gang leader. He was involved in human trafficking. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary yesterday, defending the move, saying the focus should not be on these individual cases that are being disputed, but on the fact that the vast majority of these guys were gang members and they're now out of the country. And despite the fact that she acknowledges there was a clerical error here again, that he was deported, despite a judge saying he can't be deported to El Salvador, they say they have no intention of bringing him back to the U.S. El Salvador is his home country. You have the administration here arguing that the judge does not have jurisdiction over this, but you are likely to see legal proceedings here related to this case. President Trump and the administration here argue that gangs like MS-13, Tren de Aragua, TDA out of Venezuela are perpetrating, attempting to get inside the U.S. They say it's tantamount to war and invasion by these gangs. And so that is why they invoked that Alien Enemies Act from 1798, which is going through separate proceedings right now. Right now, while they were hoping to be able to use this, the White House was to deport as many people as they could, not going through a judge. That has been frozen. The use of this law has been frozen by another judge. We've been following that case for all of you as well. Now, as far as this specific case, immigration officials again admit this was an error, but they argue courts here have no jurisdiction. That despite the error, this guy's in El Salvador, and they have no intention of bringing him back. They view him as a threat to Americans here. Jill, this was the subject of a conversation we had last week at the White House when we spoke to White House Senior Policy Advisor May Melman. I asked her specifically, point blank, was she confident, is the White House confident that all those people they sent to El Salvador, to that mega prison, without going through a judge, that they in fact should all be there and had no doubts about the fact that they were in gangs? Here's a bit of the question and what she had to say. A couple of the individuals, their lawyers were saying they were actually asylum seekers. Curious, like, are you guys foolproof that like every single individual sent to El Salvador was a member of that gang? Or is there the possibility that a couple people may have been sent there who were not?
This was a very robust, very well-researched, very coordinated effort by the Department of Homeland Security in coordination with law enforcement. This is not something that happened overnight. This is something that they were very coordinated, very focused on. And so we have the best law enforcement agencies in the world, and I think they executed their mission as they should have.
So that was Melman there, not saying beyond a reasonable doubt that they know that there were no mistakes, but saying there was robust vetting and they feel good about what they did there. But this is where the argument comes from Democrats and some Republicans who are like, listen, this is why we have due process. This is why you go before a judge. Because once you deport individuals to a mega prison that has 40,000 people in the middle of El Salvador, things tend to get more complicated, and there are huge ramifications here. Because in the case of Abrigo Garcia here, a judge determined here that he faced real threats there, and now he's in a prison with a lot of gang members in El Salvador. So you have that on that side. The administration, in the documents I read last night, Jill, say he'll be fine in that prison. We don't think there'll be an issue there for him. And again, we regret the error here, but ultimately what's done is done, in so many words there in these filings. Now, his attorneys have filed a petition to have him released from El Salvador, returned to the U.S. That's another court fight that we will watch here. And it, again, is notable, Jill, watching how each side views this case, from the White House, from Republicans close to Trump here. They say, at the end of the day, this guy, as of 2019, a judge said that he should be deported. He came in here illegally, just not to El Salvador. Our bad. He was deported to El Salvador. Whereas, you see people who are very critical of this, who are concerned about the rule of law and due process, who say, this guy had an American-born child. This guy has an American wife, that he's been without criminal issues here for 6 years, living and working in Maryland. And that's effectively the temporary protection status that he got from the judge. And that this is a huge issue here, that there needs to be oversight. This is why courts exist. And so that is yet another case we will watch here, Jill, because we've told folks about a couple of the other cases, the hairdresser, the makeup artist, a couple other individuals who were sent to this prison in El Salvador, who their family and lawyers say had nothing to do with being in a gang.
Moshe, I was watching the White House press briefing on Tuesday, and it was interesting because Caroline Leavitt was very confident in that Garcia really had no right to be here in the United States, not backing down at all, basically saying that under the Aliens Act, these gangs are considered terrorist operations. And so if you're a member of the gang, you're considered a terrorist, and terrorists have no rights here, and that the U.S. can deport them. Of course, his lawyer is saying none of this is true. He is not even in the gang, but that is the rationale.
Yeah, and, listen, he did come in here illegally, but the main issue is you even have DOJ attorneys. This is why this case is so remarkable, admitting in documents, we screwed up. We should not have deported him to El Salvador. A judge had ordered us not to deport him to El Salvador. A judge said that he should be deported, but they had to find another place to send him. So that's one of the questions we have here is like, if he had been sent to Honduras or had been sent to Venezuela or some other country had taken him in, that actually wouldn't have been against the law here. It's the fact that he was sent to a country in which a judge determined he faced threats. Again, another storyline coming out of the Alien Enemies Act that we will continue to monitor here.
Staying with politics, today is what the Trump administration is calling Liberation Day. President Trump set to announce a new batch of tariffs in a Rose Garden ceremony this afternoon. Those tariffs set to take effect immediately, although at the time of this recording on Tuesday evening, he has not yet said what exactly those tariffs will be. The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump's team has pitched him on several ideas of how to tariff other countries, including a 20% global tariffs on virtually all imports. The president has a few different goals here. He wants to both raise revenue with tariffs. He wants to use the tariffs to get other countries to lower their own tariffs on U.S. goods. But there is some concern, even amongst members of the Trump administration, on what tariffs will do to prices, which are already elevated. The thinking is that there are two possibilities in terms of the tariffs. The first would be that Trump goes again with that universal 20% tariffs on all imports to basically all of the U.S. trading partners from Europe to China to India. The second is that he would go with individual tariff rates depending on the country, which could be subject to negotiation. This would be the so-called reciprocal tariff approach, if you've heard that term. Some analysts have suggested he could put 10% tariffs on some countries, but then go as high as 60% for goods coming in from China. So the question is, Moshe, how does it all play out for the American consumer, for the American economy? And I want to play this clip from an interview on CNBC Tuesday with economist Mohammed El-Arian. He says he thinks the tariffs will have one of two impacts. Take a listen.
This could be a major rewiring of the domestic economy and of the global economy, a la Thatcher, a la Reagan, where you get a more enabled private sector, streamlined government, a fairer trading system. Or alternatively, if we get tit-for-tat tariffs, we slip into stagflation. And that stagflation becomes well anchored, and that becomes problematic.
So very different possibilities here. By the way, stagflation is a combination of high inflation and slow economic growth. Not good. Moshe, CNBC anchor Andrew Ross Sorkin asked him what he thinks the odds are of each one actually happening, and he said 50-50. So basically, either this will be great for the U.S. economy or doom and gloom.
Yeah, so are you a glass half full or a glass half empty person, Jill?
I tend to be a glass half empty person, but with the economy mostly.
As she drinks a glass of water here, that's about half empty for those of you watching on YouTube.
Yes.
So
actually,
there you go.
Perfect metaphor.
You have a half empty or half full glass, depending on how you want to view it. But I mean, in all seriousness here, high risk, high reward. You have seen Republicans increasingly, as well as allies of Trump, using this wartime rhetoric, saying Americans need to be prepared for any scenario. That this is one of the reasons you have to put up with rocky markets. Is we are rewiring things for the good. We are doing long-term positive things for the U.S. economy. That's what you increasingly hear from the West Wing, from various analysts on Fox News and other places, saying, yeah, we're going to have some short-term issues. They don't define exactly what those short-term issues or how long it'll be or how significant that'll be. But ultimately, that's what they're saying, that the years and years of globalization, losing manufacturing abroad, that it's going to be a struggle here to move things back home. But how will that end up? Will that actually work out? That is unclear here. So there's a lot of uncertainty around what the tariffs will look like, how individual countries will then react to it, how businesses will handle it, how much gets pushed to us, the consumer, what other global events or domestic events will impact things. There are more questions than answers, if you can tell here by my response. And so we have been getting a variety of answers here from the administration. Some have been saying universal across the board tariffs. Some saying we're going to be nuanced in our approach here. But the thing they're trying to solve is the trade deficit that the U.S. has with China, the EU, Mexico, Vietnam, South Korea, Canada. We go on and on and on. And a lot of countries, other countries around the world have tariffs. The problem is when you start playing the tariff game, we all start elevating those tariffs. It does create global economic issues. And we haven't really seen the world going aggressive on tariffs since about 100 years ago, the 1930s. And we know what took place following the 1930s there with World War II. Not to draw a complete connection, they're not exactly the same circumstances, but ultimately that's one of the reasons why for decades most of the, especially Western economies, have been anti-tariff because of the lessons we learned around the turn of the 20th century and then in the lead up to World War II. But the president and his team are adamant here. This is going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. This is going to incentivize companies to bring more of their factories here, hire more Americans. You hear those examples from the White House on a daily basis. There's various estimates thrown out there about how many billions, hundreds of billions of dollars the U.S. could make off of tariffs, because remember, there's sort of a tax on importers. The problem is, how much will it cost us, the consumer? We've been telling you about the car tariffs in recent weeks, and businesses thrive on predictability. If you own a business or you work at a business, you want to know what's going to be happening this year and next year. You want to be able to project things. You want to know who you're going to be able to hire. You want to know how you're going to expand. And with these tariffs, that adds a lot of unpredictability to both individual businesses and the market writ large.
Another thing we're watching today from the White House, President Trump expected to consider a final proposal for TikTok today. The administration is finalizing plans for potential investors. They could include Blackstone and Oracle, also venture capital firms and major investors in the tech industry. Meeting in the Oval Office to talk about it, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
So still unclear whether he'll sign off on this, what this will involve here. Will this ensure that we are abiding by that law passed last year saying ByteDance needs to sell TikTok or else? Remember, the deadline was January 19th, was right before Inauguration Day. There was a 90-day extension in the bill that took us up until April 5th, which seemed like a far time away, but now it's coming up this Saturday. So we're looking forward to learning here what the details are of this deal. Trump has said that he believes he can extend it again, do another extension to find a deal here if they don't come up to some sort of compromise by this Saturday. Now, that's not in the law itself, and so I imagine we'll see a court fight over that potentially as well. No shortage of these court fights these days. But ultimately, Trump does not want to see TikTok shut down. So many people in America do not want to see TikTok shut down. But yet, the majority of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, had voted saying they think that the current circumstances of ByteDance/Chinese government ownership and access to TikTok is a major national security concern. So what their solution is here is something we will watch among the many stories we're watching in Washington.
Time for the speed read, starting with the results in the pair of special elections we've been telling you about for U.S. House seats in Florida and also the race to control the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. The races are shaping up to be a key national temperature check.
So that's definitely what Democrats are hoping for after tonight. They feel good about the results, particularly in Wisconsin. Democrats, of course, have not had much to celebrate for a while now, but in the very competitive purple swing state of Wisconsin Tuesday night, they saw a big victory. The Dane County Judge, Susan Crawford, winning a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, preserving the 4-3 liberal advantage in Wisconsin. Now, this is a race where more than $100 million was spent, the most expensive judicial race in American history. Wisconsin being about one of 24 states where you actually elect your state Supreme Court to 10-year terms. Crawford defeating the Waukesha County Judge, Brad Schimmel. He's the state's former attorney general, and he had the support of, among other folks, Elon Musk, who collectively spent about $25 million alone to support Schimmel. Elon was in Wisconsin over the weekend. He actually came and delivered $1 million checks to a couple of voters, saying that he was opposing activist judges. Elon, as we told you yesterday, said the future of civilization was at stake in this Wisconsin race, and ultimately here, the liberals won. So Judge Crawford here winning a 10-year term, maintaining the 4-3 liberal majority. Why does it matter? Well, there's issues in the state, abortion, labor rights, etc., the Democrats were worried about. But on top of that, the state Supreme Court deals with the redistricting every 10 years with a census. Oftentimes, the state Supreme Court has to rule on the redistricting of the state. That determines U.S. House seats. And with the House so close right now in Wisconsin, which is effectively evenly divided, right? It's a 50-50 state that sometimes goes Dem, sometimes goes Republican. Right now, 6 of the 8 House seats are districted in a way that have led to Republicans holding them. So now the Liberals have the majority as they go into redistricting. So this could be a big deal here and help Democrats win a couple seats in Wisconsin or redraw some seats to make them much more competitive for them. So huge ramifications here, both for Wisconsin residents as well as some national ramifications here. So Democrats are celebrating that. I should note, by the way, that other billionaires were involved in the race. George Soros, the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, none spent as much as Elon Musk. They spent a couple million apiece. Elon spending, again, above $20 million. Now, there is some good news for Republicans. 2 House seats in Florida, special elections, stayed red on Tuesday night. Republicans Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine, respectively, won their special elections to fill vacant seats in pretty Republican strongholds in Florida. These were the seats that were left behind by Matt Gaetz. Remember when he resigned to hopefully be Attorney General and then had to drop out of that due to his various scandals. Well, he never went back to that seat, so that had to be filled. And then there's the seat of Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor. That was also up. Republicans holding both seats. This win now bolsters the Republican margin in the U.S. House, giving Speaker Johnson a little bit more room to breathe, but still not that much. The Republican majority in the House is 220 to 213, so they really only still can lose about 3 votes without being worried, 4 votes, and then things flip. So things still narrow, not as narrow as before. At the same time, though, as I mentioned, these were heavily red seats. Democrats spent millions on them trying to make them competitive. They actually forced Trump to actually have to help these guys out, even though these are seats that Trump won by more than 30 percentage points in the fall. It appears, based on the latest numbers late Tuesday night, that they each won comfortably by about 15 points, but not the margin Trump got. So Democrats are trying to read into that this was also a good sign for them, though again, double-digit wins in both of those seats for the Republicans. So that's what we have as far as the elections last night. One more political thing here, a remarkable historical event that we watched late Monday and all day Tuesday. You might have seen these images. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking. He broke the record that Strom Thurmond, senator from 1957, held inside the chamber. Now, Strom Thurmond had spoken for about 24 hours. At the time, he was rallying against the civil rights legislation. Well, about 70 years later, Cory Booker began delivering remarks Monday night, vowing to use his time and speak for as long as humanly possible to protest Donald Trump. So this was not technically a filibuster where you're opposing legislation. This was just Cory Booker taking to the floor and saying, I'm going to talk and talk and talk and try to create a moment here. Certainly caught a lot of attention, a lot of media attention, a rare Democratic, they would refer to it as a win out of Washington, where they're not responding to Trump necessarily, where it's not revolving around the White House, where Democrats are making their own news. So Cory Booker, the New Jersey senator, speaking for 25 hours and 5 minutes, breaking that Strom Thurmond record by nearly an hour. He went from 7 p.m. Monday until just past 8 p.m. on Tuesday. The rules there is that he can't leave the chamber to use the bathroom, he can't eat meals, and he can't sit down. And he was able to do that for about 25 hours again and 5 minutes. He did get help from fellow Democrats he would yield the floor to. They would ask him several minute-long questions to give him a chance to catch his breath, a chance to rest. But ultimately, Booker standing there. And what he said here, among the many things he said over 25 hours, was it's not left or right. It's right or wrong, and it's time to get into good trouble, quoting the late John Lewis, the late Democratic congressman and civil rights leader, who referred to various protests as good trouble. Here's a bit of Cory Booker as he began his marathon session Monday night.
I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business of the United States Senate for as long as I am physically able. I rise tonight because I believe sincerely that our country is in crisis. These are not normal times in America, and they should not be treated as such.
So Cory Booker there breaking a record. It's not clear when this record will be broken again. 25 hours, certainly nothing to scoff at. Even some Republican colleagues, despite saying they disagreed with many things that he said, congratulated him on the achievement. As for the question many of you had, how did he not use the bathroom for 25 hours? Well, he told reporters afterwards that he actually fasted in advance and dehydrated himself in advance. So he says he stopped eating on Friday, stopped drinking water more than 24 hours out. So sometime on Sunday, and basically dehydrated himself completely. And so no food for several days, no water for 24 hours going into it. And then for the most part, he didn't drink while he was standing up there the entire time. Now, he did say that his stomach was cramping at times. He certainly did not feel comfortable. Once he finally got off after 24 hours, he drank some water, ate a banana, did a couple interviews, and I imagine we'll be hearing more from him in the coming days.
From ABC News, Attorney General Pam Bondi is directing federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione if he is convicted of the December murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. One of the federal charges against Mangione is murder through the use of a firearm, which does make him eligible for the death penalty if convicted. Bondi saying that Mangione's murder of Brian Thompson, an innocent man and father of 2 young children, was a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America. She says, after careful consideration, I have directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case as we carry out President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again.
Remember, Mangione is accused of gunning down Thompson, the insurance executive, outside a Hilton hotel in Midtown Manhattan back in early December as he was headed into an investors conference. Eventually, Mangione was arrested in Pennsylvania several days after the murder. Charges were filed against him in Pennsylvania. Charges were then filed against him at the state level here in New York. Then federal charges also filed in December. Then Attorney General Merrick Garland said that he's planned the attack for months, stalked his victim for days. And so far, you have multiple cases here. And the deal was that you would have the state case before the federal case. In the state case in New York, he faces lifetime in prison. In the federal case, he faces the death penalty now. It's unclear whether this is going to flip things. He is due back in federal court on the federal charges on April 18th. Unclear what the negotiations are right now between New York authorities and federal authorities as to whether they'll move ahead with the federal charges first. Otherwise, you're going to see a whole state trial, a sentencing there, and then a federal trial. And then, of course, the death penalty portion of the sentencing pending that he is found guilty. So a lot here for Mangione, Jill, as we've learned that he's in that detention facility along with Diddy and Sam Bankman-Fried, this infamous facility here in New York.
From the Associated Press, a temporary win for new parents who serve in Congress. A small group of Republicans joined Democrats to stand up to a plan by Republican leadership to block what is called proxy voting or remote voting. Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna has legislation looking to allow new mothers and fathers in the House to vote on legislation remotely. Luna had a child in 2023 as she was serving in Congress. Democratic Representatives Brittany Pedersen and Sarah Jacobs introduced the effort with Luna and another Republican, Representative Michael Lawler, earlier this year. Despite that, GOP leadership is opposed to remote voting, but their plan was stopped on Tuesday. The unusual coalition of Democrats and a handful of Republicans has thrown the House into temporary paralysis with this surprise development. After the vote, House GOP leaders canceled votes for the rest of the week. Republican leaders oppose the idea of remote voting and are trying to pass a rule that would have blocked Luna's petition to allow remote voting for new lawmaker parents up to 12 weeks after giving birth. Pedersen, a Democrat, spoke in favor of Luna's resolution on the House floor Tuesday as she held her 9-week-old son, Sam.
No mom or dad should be in the position that I was in and so many parents have found themselves in. It is anti-woman, it's anti-family, and we need to come together.
You might have seen the pictures recently of Pedersen holding her infant as she had to vote. She's only the 13th member of the House to have given birth while serving in Congress. She was back yesterday with her child, saying she has no alternative right now. Her son was born prematurely, and she faced an impossible decision, but ultimately, she has a job to do, and they're not really accommodating to young parents. Jill, we saw a number of young female members of Congress on the Democrat and then Republican side, you mentioned Anna Paulina Luna, team up here on this issue, saying this is one of the reasons why Congress is so old. They do not accommodate young people, including young moms. And as Congress has become more female and younger, or people are attempting to make it younger by running earlier and earlier. They need to do more to create allowances, allow proxy voting here. This was allowed during the height of COVID, but Republicans, the majority of Republicans here, including leadership Speaker Johnson, are against it. Johnson says he believes this is unconstitutional, that it violates 2 centuries of tradition. It opens up what he says is a Pandora's box, where ultimately we're all voting via AI or we're voting remotely, and that's not what Congress is supposed to be. But interesting here that you had a handful of Republicans defy the speaker here and throw things out of whack. This was part of a number of rules the Republicans are trying to pass here. Rules are very important because it creates procedures for how to proceed. There's a lot of nitty-gritty Washington speak you'll probably be hearing here in the coming days. Jill, right now at Mo News, I just sent messages to a couple of those members who voted on this yesterday, and hopefully we can land an interview with one of them to break it all down for us, what it's like to be a young mom in Congress and what this all means.
Our next story, straight from the Mo newsletter. Tens of thousands of pages of recently declassified files regarding the assassination of President John F. Kennedy revealed that several CIA officials lied under oath about their knowledge of shooter Lee Harvey Oswald before the events in 1963. Journalist and author Jefferson Morley telling the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets that this knowledge shows a pattern of misconduct and malfeasance, leading to a new conclusion. Morley had previously appeared on the Mo News podcast. He says that the newest documents show the CIA had a culpability or at least complicity in the murder of the president. Then CIA counterintelligence chief James Angleton lied under oath about what the agency knew regarding the assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, before JFK was killed. We have now learned that Angleton had a nearly 200-page report about Oswald on his desk 1 week before the assassination.
Emphasis on before. That for some reason, the head of CIA counterintelligence got a report from the FBI the week before JFK is assassinated about this guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, who it turns out the CIA and FBI had both been tracking for a number of years, as I mentioned yesterday in the podcast, as he moved from the U.S. to Russia, to Cuba, to Mexico, and was involved in all these various groups. The government was keeping tabs on this guy, Oswald. This is a notable revelation here. Jefferson Morley, again, appeared early days of Mo News, Jill, when before we had the podcast, before we had the newsletter, we did a Zoom with him when we probably had like 50,000 followers on Instagram. And at the time, I was like, well, what could come out with the rest of these documents? And he's like, listen, we're going to learn more about like the CIA doing CYA, if you will, because, you know, they were incompetent in somehow preventing the assassination. Fast forward 4 years, and he's like, these new documents show that, like, whoa, the CIA knew way more than even we thought they knew about Oswald before all of that. Here's a bit of Morley testifying yesterday, asked by some members of Congress, okay, what do we know?
One false statement might be incompetence. A second false statement might be CYA for the first false statement. But 3 false statements by top CIA officers about Kennedy's accused killer, that is a pattern. It's a pattern of misconduct. It's a pattern of malfeasance. The new fact pattern leads to a new conclusion. We know now what they knew about Oswald and when they knew it.
So it wasn't just this guy Angleton. It was also the Deputy Director Richard Helms, who apparently lied to the Warren Commission. That was the big commission investigating the assassination. At the time, Helms lied to the commission saying, we only had minimal information about Oswald. He didn't mention they had a 200 or so page report. You also had a top official of the CIA named George Ioannidis, who oversaw the dissident Cubans in 1963. They didn't have a great relationship with JFK. They were involved in Bay of Pigs. And so ultimately they had a axe to grind with JFK. He apparently, Ioannidis, also lied to the Warren Commission about what they knew about Oswald in advance. And so 6 decades later here, we're getting a better glimpse of the CIA's operations. As Morley says here, a culpability or complicity in things. He advises that Congress should reopen the investigation here. They should ask the CIA why exactly multiple CIA officials lied here. That it's not just incompetence, one lie. It's not just CYA, 2 lies, but multiple top officials lying to the Warren Commission. You also had Oliver Stone, the filmmaker, testify yesterday, so I was watching that hearing very closely. Very interesting. You know, Jill, it's not often that we cover stories 60 plus years later, but this one still making headlines after all these years.
Okay, now to some April Fool's Day pranks. The Washington Post fact-checked every corporate-branded April Fool's joke that they could find, starting with Omaha Steaks, which apparently did not publish a 3-book series of meet-cute romance.
Get it? Meat steaks with an A. Yeah.
The Louvre is not turning its pyramid into a Bass Pro Shops megastore.
Who believed that? Though we should note that April Fool's Day does have origins in France. As I mentioned yesterday, it was officially called Poisson d'Avril, the fish of April.
The Great British Bake Off is not adding air conditioning to its tent. The Abbey Road crossing isn't going anywhere. Abbey Road posted on Twitter or X, it is with a heavy heart that we announce that the Abbey Road crossing is set to be removed for the foreseeable future, a decision beyond our control. The cherry blossoms, by the way, are just fine. Don't listen to the National Park Service, which tweeted, last night's storm blew a lot of blossoms off the trees, so peak bloom is officially over. But don't worry, when we got to work this morning on April 1st, we started gathering the fallen petals and should have them back on the trees soon.
Yes, apparently the National Park Service is not gluing the cherry blossoms back on the trees. Other April Fool's jokes yesterday, Nutella announcing a B&B. That doesn't exist, even though that would be amazing. A Nutella float, Nutella bedspread. There's no such thing as Dr. Pepper flavored Tic Tacs. That was Dr. Pepper's joke yesterday. Denny's did not collaborate with a mattress firm on bedroom furniture with a warming drawer for pancake slams. You can't purchase solely organic pina colada gummies with organic rum in them, even though I think somebody should get working on that.
Moshe, I thought the same thing. That's not the worst idea I've ever heard.
Blue Sky's character limit's still 300 characters, despite that April Fool's joke. Dulles Airport does not actually have an exciting construction update about our new concourse. Dulles Airport, don't mess around.
It's like mean. I've never been to Dulles, but
no, you're lucky that you haven't been to Dulles Airport.
Who thought of that? That's not so off base, right? Like, that is an announcement that they could potentially make.
Body Armor is sticking to drinks, no sports performance shampoo, and there's no Concorde revival flight from Paris to New York. And then the one that got Jill yesterday, Tiger Woods tweeting out that he had a miraculous recovery and he was going to play in the Masters next week. And then he said, psych, April Fool's Day. Jill didn't get to that portion of the tweet before she was like, oh my God.
Yes, we were chatting and I'm like, guys, have you been following this about Tiger Woods? And Moshe was like, oh, Jill, please.
Happy April Fool's morning, Jill. All right, we end here with On This Day in History, things that actually happened on this day. We begin in 1513, 500 plus years ago. Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon comes ashore on the Florida coast near present-day St. Augustine, claiming the territory for the Spanish crown. He gave Florida its name, meaning full of flowers. He named the peninsula, which he believed to be an island at the time. They would later discover it was a peninsula. Legend has it that based on the information he got from the natives there, that he was searching for the Fountain of Youth, a fabled water source that would bring eternal youth. It turns out Florida didn't have a Fountain of Youth, but it has become a place where we go to retire, hoping we could live for as long as possible. So sort of, kind of like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the next best thing, right?
Depending on how you feel about Florida, you might agree with that sentiment or you might disagree with that sentiment. All right, we fast forward here to 1956 As the World Turns, premiered the soap opera produced by Procter & Gamble. Literally, the soap company was creating soap operas. Premieres on this day in 1956. That soap opera would end in 2009. Another premiere on this day, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, on this day in 1968, had its world premiere, becoming a classic, setting a benchmark for sci-fi films. A bit of music history, as I mentioned at the top. A young man named Beethoven premieres his first symphony, the first of many, in Vienna. It would mark his emergence as a key figure in classical music. You also had Mozart at this performance, and they said this 29-year-old named Beethoven, he's going places.
You know, he's very good at piano. Watch him. Keep an eye on him.
He's got symphonies. He writes for all the instruments. All right. Fast forward from Beethoven to the Beach Boys on this day in 1964. The Beach Boys began recording I Get Around, which would soon become their first #1 hit on the Billboard charts. Jill, right now, my 18-month-old Olivia, her favorite song is a Beach Boys song. If you ask her what her favorite song is, she goes, ba, ba, ba.
Ba, ba, ba. Yes. Yeah. Could only be one thing, unless it was Ba, Ba, Black Sheep, but that's not the Beach Boys.
She also knows Ba, Ba, Black Sheep, but when she says ba, 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 It's Barbara Ann. She likes the oldies but goodies.
Don't we all, Moshe? That is a wrap on today's Mo News podcast. Tons of news developing today, so make sure to check the Instagram and, of course, check back here tomorrow. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please review us kindly in the App Store. The reviews really do make a difference.
Thank you guys for that. See you back here tomorrow, Jill.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.